This exercise, which is fairly long, will be carried out on your first 2 instructional flights. As the name indicates, you'll learn how the controls work and their effect on the aircraft in flight. As this is the foundation on which all other flight instruction is based, it's vitally important that you master all the elements of the exercise and learn properly from them so as to avoid difficulties later on. The purpose of this lesson, therefore, is to explain in simple terms the theory behind what you'll learn in the air. Always remember, if you don't understand something, either in this lesson or in the air, ask your instructor while it's still fresh in your mind. In order to control the aircraft in flight, a pilot maneuvers it about its 3 axes. We identify these axes and the movement of the aircraft about each axis as follows. The lateral axis, about which the aircraft pitches. The longitudinal axis, about which the aircraft rolls. The normal axis, about which the aircraft yaws. The aircraft is controlled in pitch, roll, and yaw by the flying control surfaces. The elevator, or stabilator, the ailerons, and the rudder. As you see on screen now, the elevators are movable surfaces attached to a fixed tailplane, whereas when the whole tailplane moves, we call this surface a stabilator. The function of the elevators and the stabilator is identical. In this CBT, the aircraft we most commonly use to illustrate our briefings is the Warrior, so we shall most often refer to the stabilator when referring to control in pitch. As we've said, the stabilator controls the aircraft in pitch. The stabilator itself is operated by fore and aft movements of the control wheel. When the control wheel is moved forward, the stabilator moves as shown on the screen, generating an aerodynamic force which causes the nose to pitch down. A rearward movement of the control wheel moves the stabilator in the opposite sense, causing the nose to pitch up. The ailerons control the aircraft in roll. They are operated by a rotary movement of the control wheel. The ailerons are interconnected, so that when the control wheel is moved to the left aileron moves up and the right aileron moves down. This movement makes the aircraft roll to the left. Moving the control wheel to the right moves the ailerons in the opposite direction, and the aircraft rolls to the right. The rudder controls the aircraft in yaw. The rudder is operated by foot pedals in the cockpit. Pushing the left pedal moves the rudder to the left, and the aircraft yaws to the left. Pushing the right pedal causes the aircraft to yaw to the right. Let's now look at the primary effects of the flying controls from the point of view of the pilot in the cockpit. In the air exercise on effects of controls, you'll hear your instructor refer frequently to the aircraft's attitude. Attitude is the word we use to describe the position of the aircraft relative to the natural horizon as seen by you, the pilot, in your horizon picture. The aircraft's attitude can vary in pitch or roll. Here, for instance, we see the aircraft with a pronounced nose-down attitude. And here the aircraft has a nose-high attitude. On screen now, the aircraft's attitude shows a 30 degrees angular bank. On screen now, you can see what's sometimes referred to as the datum attitude. The datum attitude can be described as the attitude to which all other attitudes are compared, and to which you return the aircraft after flying the various exercises. Our datum attitude here shows the aircraft with its wings level. That is, with the top of the coaming parallel to the horizon, and a typical pitch attitude for cruising flight at 100 knots. If the pilot eases the control wheel forwards, the nose pitches down and continues to pitch down until the pilot moves the control wheel backwards to the neutral point. The aircraft now holds a new nose-down pitch attitude. You'll notice that the speed increases with the airspeed indicator settling down at a higher reading. If the pilot now eases the control wheel backwards, the nose pitches up, and will continue to pitch up until the pilot checks the control wheel forward slightly to select the neutral point. The aircraft now holds a new nose-high pitch attitude. You'll notice that the speed decreases, with the airspeed indicator settling down at a lower reading. By easing the control wheel forward again, the pilot can reselect the datum attitude. Fore and aft movement of the control wheel, then, controls the aircraft in pitch. Right from the beginning of your first flying lesson, you must learn that the control wheel should always be moved smoothly and progressively. This applies to all control inputs, whether in pitch, roll, or yaw. If the pilot turns the control wheel to the left, the aircraft will roll to the left and continue rolling until the pilot selects a neutral position with the control wheel, whereupon the aircraft maintains the angle of bank that it had reached during the roll. On moving the control wheel to the right, the aircraft rolls to the right. The roll continues until the control wheel is moved to a neutral position. By moving the control wheel to the left again, the pilot may reselect the datum attitude. Turning the control wheel then controls the aircraft in roll. Identifying a prominent landmark straight ahead, now let's look at the primary effect of rudder. The pilot pushes forward on the left rudder pedal, causing the aircraft to yaw to the left. The yaw is held for as long as left rudder is applied. Note that the slip ball has moved out to the right. The aircraft is now out of balance. When the rudder pedals are centralized, the yaw is removed, and the aircraft returns to balanced flight. Note that the slip ball is returned to the middle. If the pilot pushes forward on the right rudder pedal, the aircraft yaws to the right. Again the yaw is held for as long as right rudder is applied. The aircraft is again out of balance, with the slip ball being displaced to the left. When the rudder pedals are centralized, the yaw is removed, and the aircraft returns to balanced flight. Note that the slip ball has returned to the middle. Activation of the rudder, then, controls the aircraft in yaw. In order that you may learn how to maneuver your aircraft correctly and skillfully, it's essential that you understand that the aircraft response to movements of the control wheel in the pitching, rolling, and yawing planes is relative to the aircraft axes and not relative to the natural horizon. So whatever the attitude of the aircraft, here we see it with 30 degrees of bank, the aircraft response to movement of the stabilator will always be to pitch about its lateral axis. Similarly, applying rudder will cause it to yaw about its normal axis, while operation of the ailerons will roll the aircraft about its longitudinal axis. Having considered the primary effects of the main control surfaces, we'll now look at their effectiveness, or, put another way, at the rate of response of the aircraft to control movements. Control effectiveness depends on three factors: the amount by which the control surface is deflected, the speed at which the aircraft is flying, the airflow from the propeller, more normally referred to as the propeller slipstream. We'll look at each factor in turn. We'll refer to the ailerons to illustrate the first point, though the effect is the same for all the control surfaces. If the control wheel is turned through a very small angle, the ailerons deflect by a small amount, and the aircraft responds with a slow rate of roll. If the control wheel is turned to a larger angle, aileron deflection increases, giving a higher rate of roll. Control effectiveness is, therefore, proportional to the amount of deflection of the control surfaces, and not to the speed at which the pilot moves the control wheel. Now we'll look at the effect of airspeed on control effectiveness. If, with the aircraft in the datum attitude, at an indicated airspeed of 100 knots, as shown on screen here, you maneuver the aircraft in roll, you'll be able to note the feel of the control wheel and the ailerons, that is, their resistance to displacement, and also the rate of aircraft response. Then, without altering the throttle setting, put the aircraft into a shallow dive at, say, 120 knots, and repeat the rolling maneuver. You'll notice that the controls feel firmer, and that the rate of aircraft response increases. Now, once again with the same throttle setting, with the nose of the aircraft raised, and at an indicated airspeed of 70 knots, if you repeat the rolling maneuver once more, you'll notice that the controls feel less firm, and that the rate of aircraft response decreases. Control effectiveness is, therefore, also proportional to airspeed. Here, we've illustrated this point by referring to aileron only, but the same is also true of stabilator and rudder. However, if we hold the nose high attitude and open the throttle to full power, the increased velocity and energy of the propeller slipstream will cause the rudder and stabilator to become more responsive again and firmer in feel. This propeller slipstream effect affects only the elevator and the rudder. The ailerons are located outside the propeller slipstream. We have now learnt the primary effect of the main control surfaces. The stabilator, or elevator, controls the aircraft in pitch. The rudder controls the aircraft in yaw, and the ailerons control the aircraft in roll. As the aircraft yaws about its normal axis and rolls about its longitudinal axis, both these movements generate what are called further effects of the control deflections. We'll now look at these further, or secondary, effects. There is no secondary effect of elevator or stabilator, though, as you've learned, as the nose of the aircraft is pitched up and down, the change in attitude causes a change in the aircraft's speed through the air. The primary effect of rudder is yaw. During the yawing movement, the advancing wing travels faster than the retreating wing, thereby developing more lift, and the aircraft will roll in the direction of yaw. If the rudder is held on, this will lead to more yaw, and more roll, and so on, causing the aircraft to enter a spiral dive. So, while yaw is the primary effect of applying rudder, the further effect is roll in the direction of yaw. If aileron is applied when the aircraft is flying in a straight and level path, and no further action is taken, the aircraft will roll, and then side-slip towards the lower wing. As the aircraft side-slips, the relative airflow takes on a sideways component which acts on the aircraft's keel or side surfaces. This airflow generates yaw in the direction of the slip. Yaw occurs because the greater part of the keel surface is behind the centre of gravity. If unchecked, the yaw will cause further roll for the reasons explained previously. This in turn produces more slip, then more yaw, and more roll, and if allowed to continue, the aircraft will enter a spiral dive. So, while roll is the primary effect of applying aileron, the further effect is yaw in the direction of roll.